All right, good evening, everyone out there. It's another beautiful, beautiful Friday evening. And you know how we do it. 7 o'clock, time for us to talk about our health. You're welcome to the program, Your Health 360. My name is Jacqueline Adebija. And today we'll be talking about, all right, so this is something that not as deadly as Ebola, but it is here with us. And you know how it is. When you get too used to something, I mean, it becomes a part of you. Chances are, as human beings, we begin to relax. Same way we see that we're not taking, COVID protocols as seriously as we should. This apathy, the I don't care attitude starts to slip in. But this is an infection or disease that between January and February of last year, I'm talking about 2020, took away from Nigeria about 70 people confirmed from the hospital. We don't know how many more outside the hospital, but in 1 month took away 70 souls. And it's just 10 states out of the whole 36 states that we have. It's just 10 states that did not report an incident of this last year. I mean, between the 1 month that I'm talking about, between January and February of last year, 70 people. And that's the data that we have from hospitals. You and I know that in Nigeria, for every one case in the hospital, so that we don't sound like alarmist, we have over 100 more outside that, 70. So if we were to multiply that by 100 or even more, you know what we're talking about. We're talking about Lassa fever, and this evening with me in the studio is Dr. Augustine Owen. Dr. Augustine Owen, it is a pleasure to have you with us. It's great to have you here with us.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much.
Now, Dr. Owen, Lassa fever.
All right.
What is it? Why have we not been able to get rid of it? How did it start in Nigeria?
All right. Well, thank you for your question. Lassa fever began in Nigeria in 1969, where 2 missionary nurses died in a town called Lassa in Borno State. So there was a description of Lassa. Scientists have described Lassa before its occurrence. So it came to existence in 1969 in Borno State, Nigeria. But so Lassa fever is actually an hemorrhagic viral disease, whereby, when you say hemorrhagic, it's like blood related, and virus is the one causing it. So when you say viral hemorrhagic disease, you are talking about Ebola, which is the younger brother. You're talking about Lassa fever and others. But here we'll be dwelling on Lassa fever. So Lassa fever is caused by a virus called Lassa. If you see, it's just as simple as words. Lassa, virus. So how does it actually come to existence? What are the possible symptoms of Lassa? So you could say the patient could present with fever, sometimes with headaches, body pains, and they have weaknesses, muscle pains. But most especially, some of the worst cases, they present with bleeding. So I said hemorrhagic before. So now, bleeding is coming in. Person start bleeding from the nostrils, from the GIT. When I mean GIT, maybe from the buttock or what have you, they start bleeding from such orifice. That's any openings, blood will just start coming out from there. That becomes a worse situation. But the good thing is about Lassa is that 80% of persons, 80%, if you say 80%, when I mean 80%, I mean out of every 10% that have Lassa, 8 out of 10 don't present with much symptoms, much problems. So the remaining 2 becomes a problem. But health, a single soul is very important to any health worker. Just one single soul. So we can't say because 20% is not 20% is worse scenario, let's focus on 20. What about the 80? If you said concerning also with the issue of COVID-19 too, most persons have mild symptoms. If you check the classes of COVID-19, the way symptoms present, some persons have a milder symptoms. You just have sore throat, can't smell, You just feel like, yes, I think I have COVID. But you are a suspected case, though, until proven otherwise. So, but that is for COVID. But still, it can have adverse effects. So for Lassa fever, I've really talked about the introduction and the symptoms and signs. So what are the risk factors? What are the things that actually cause this Lassa fever we're talking about? They say there's a particular rat, we call it rodents. There's this mammalian kind of rats. They are the carriers. When you mean carriers, it's an English word, carriers. You carry the virus within your system and you move around with it. So rats, the virus dwells in the rat. So what happens? They move around in our environments, in our homes. So if we have a contact with anything associated with that rat, it could be the feces of the rat, it could be the urine of the rat, it could be even by touching the rat, or by the rat even having contact with our food. So we, from that avenue, have gotten contact with that virus. You know, I said the virus moves in the rat. It stays in the rat. It's not harmful to the rat. So the rat is a carrier. So what happens? The rat moves with the virus and have contact with our food particles. Wherever we may keep them, keeping them unsafe. So the rat gets in contact with them. I could tell you that in most communities where rats breed a lot, you could tell me you could have rat urine, you could have rat fecal matters, you could have children having contact with rats. So what happens when human being becomes infected or becomes infected with the virus? It takes about 1 week to 3 weeks for symptoms to come out. So that means if you have so imagine I said the symptoms. So the symptoms actually look like your common fever, which is malaria. It also looks like common typhoid. So if you're having these symptoms of headache, fever, body pain, and what have you, you may think you just have fever. It may be Lassa. I'm not saying it's Lassa. It may be Lassa. So that's why I always advocate that you present yourself to the hospital. If after all treated, you know that we the health workers know exactly what to do. So that's where we go to the next step, which is how do we even detect the Lassa at place of work?
Before you go to all of that, I would like to ask about, there was something very cogent, I think, that you said, which is sometimes even people who have Lassa are asymptomatic. That means that they walk around without looking ill or even feeling ill. So the question is, just like in the case of COVID, is it possible for these people who are asymptomatic to pass on this? Is it possible for it to pass from an asymptomatic human being to another human being? Yeah. And if so, how?
Yes, you actually said it well now. That point is very blank. It seems you're actually following. And I believe this question could have been asked by everybody listening to us as well. The question you were asking is human contact to contact, because now the virus is in a rat. We have gone in contact with the rat. Now we're having a virus. Yes, it's possible. And that is where I will come to prevention later on. Now, for prevention, most time community hygiene. Let's not go there. Remember your question was, how can we transmit human to human? Right. It's still by secretions. Now, I could tell you that rats are in our fluids. The virus, are in our fluids. When I mean fluids, it's not like it's much in your saliva. Like, for instance, it takes like 3 months from data, for rat to be in a semen. So when you, as a man, meet with your wife, the virus can as well be in your semen the virus must have been in your body for as long as that possible, to stay in your body for 3 months to infect your wife. So that means the carrier mode is also through our personal hygienes, which also it was what COVID-19 protocol was also talking about. So I keep saying, there's one time I gave a presentation also, this general precaution of hand washing, it should come to stay, not because we're having an advent or epidemics of particular disease. It should just be something that we should be used to. All our schools, all our offices, or wherever you are, should always hand wash yourself. That is the most universal precaution. That could solve a lot of problems. So that means human can be a carrier from contact, either from hand to hand shake or whatever it means, through exchange of fluids. That's also another way that a man to man can carry. So now, for prevention, obviously, our rats, keep your items, community hygiene, which is the most important way of prevention. community hygiene is one very important. Therefore, health workers, what do? If you have somebody who's infected, wear your nose masks, your lab coats, avoid contact, treat such patient in an isolated place. Remember, isolation centers are existing now. So you take such patient to isolation. Once you detect it, once you send for investigation using ELISA test, when you get the virus, you can detect the virus through that test. You can also use culture, cell culture, but most preferably ELISA test. I can't use the medical word for that. It's an enzyme link immunoassay. You won't understand that. But I have to go to a point where people that who are listening get the communication. We have to talk. I have to come to.
So doctor, but if we are talking about the fact that we have tests that are special to detect Lassa fever in a person, and we're saying also that the basic symptoms or signs of Lassa are actually they mimic or they look like the normal fever that we have. We all know that when we present to the hospital, most of the times they will tell you that, do a Widal test, a malaria test, and if the doctor wants to push it, might tell you to do a full blood count.
Yes.
How do you know when to press? Either as a doctor or as a patient, now asking your doctor to say, look, I think you should check me for, Lassa fever.
Yeah.
At what point do you press for that?
Okay, now, in actually treating any patient that works in the hospital, maintain your universal precaution as a health worker. Now, a patient presents to the hospital with fever. For instance, we are going to look at the common things that occurs commonly. Fever occurs commonly, but also in endemic because mosquito bite and the rest of them. Now, you take a sample and you do malaria test, it's obviously positive. And you treat the patient get improved. You must see an improvement while treating a patient for simple malaria or simple typhoid. But this one, you are treating this patient is not getting improved. What you do, the next thing is the line of action is to isolate the patient because you are already suspecting something related to fever, hemorrhagic or viral hemorrhagic disease. That's a suspect. And again, in where we practice, when you tell a patient you have certain things, you don't say it. You actually tell them you are suspecting in a good manner. Because if you say, madam, you have COVID or you have Lassa, they get scared. So we have to find a way to coin it and make it look very palatable and says we are likely to suspect that you have this, and we'll send your sample for ELISA test.
Because I'm actually putting myself in that position where I know I've had situations where I'm suffering from malaria-like symptoms and I've taken, medication, sometimes orally, and sometimes I've even been injected.
Yes.
And I didn't really find relief. And a lot of us just walk around saying, it's resistant malaria. I've never really had any doctor say to me, why don't we do this? So my question to you is this. Are there certain other parameters that you as a doctor you might want to take a look at? Probably, is this patient living in a certain kind of place or something? Are these the kind of things that make you decide on whether or not you should push for the test that could detect Lassa?
Very good. Now, another additional symptoms that could mimic, another additional symptoms that could help you say that this patient is likely to have Lassa is pharyngitis. These patients come with sore throat, and they also have excess protein in their urine. Now, that's your full blood count you talk about that time. You see your lymphocyte getting down on the line, decreased. So you have decreased. So on the lab test, you see a decreased lymphocyte. In fact, a decreased lymphocyte from full blood count means it's almost meaning that the patient have viral infection ongoing as a health worker. So there are many viral infections that are possible that can cause it, but viral infection is one of them. So you know that this patient, his lymphocyte is coming down. That means likely viral infection. Okay, now, where this person stays, like you were saying, the person's, let's check the hygiene of the person. Where do you stay? Do you have rat at home? People will definitely deny. Truth also is very accountable here. Saying the truth that, okay, I have rat at home. So you check history. But we have a poor history background here. Even patients there tell us lies. And we too, with the hectic kind of works we do, the numbers of patients we see, we don't have time with the patient. So you imagine you seeing a large number of patients, and how often, what is the time frame that you will ask that kind of question for a patient? It's almost not too right, but it is unethical. We should do our work and ask all the vital questions that will make us make a diagnosis. Because a good doctor doesn't have to wait for lab results. A good doctor, 70 to 80% of your clinical symptoms can give you a diagnosis, a leading diagnosis. I repeat, 70 to 80% of a good symptoms and signs can lead you on the diagnosis. You don't have to wait for lab result or wait for this test you are talking about that you said that a doctor, no doctor has ever asked you for it.
Mm-hmm.
So a good history, maybe you must have taken a good history, and that is why it was leading you on either is resistant malaria, not Lassa fever.
Okay, doctor, I'm going to list out some ways in which I feel that we might unconsciously open up ourselves to getting this viral infection.
Okay.
And then if there are any others, you can, I've heard about, these canned drinks that we take because they are stored and, people who sell them store them, and rats are things that, unless we want to be less than truthful with each other, we have them in abundance in our environment. And so sometimes these people just carry those, tear out, because most of them have transparent packs on the top, those canned drinks. And many times, even by the time they're about to open up those cans to put in the freezer, the rats must have eaten, the plastic that covers it to a point. So they just tear it up, dust it, and put it in the freezer. And then when you come to buy your canned drinks, they pick it up and just give it to you. So people have said to me that it's possible that if you're not very, very particular about how you clean the top of your canned drink, that could be an avenue. I've also heard about drying your food outside. You might want to dry, it can be egusi, it can be gari, it can be rice, maybe some moisture gets on it, you want to dry it, and then of course you leave it out on the flat, whatever it is that you are drying it on, and then the next morning you go back and it's dry and you just pack it and put it in your container, not knowing that, you've had a rat.
Contact with the rat.
Right.
Exactly.
I've also heard that those who store water in open containers like what we have in our villages, those earthen pots, people like that also run the risk of that, especially if the tops of those pots aren't covered. So my question is, these are like basically the things that come or run through my mind when we're talking about points of contact from the rats now to human beings, apart from the human to human. So are there any others that you've, like experiences that you've heard of how someone might have possibly contacted Lassa?
Yes, it entails any means of contact with either the fecal matter of the rat, the urine, like you have said, urine through the canned food can be, and the rat can urinate on top of the canned food. You will not even know. But the good thing also is that the virus stays outside its host. Scientists state that it stays outside the host for just 1 hour.
For just 1 hour. Because I was going to ask about yam too. Say, for instance, you go to your store one day and you find that there are rat teeth marks on your yam. Is it safe to just cut that place off, or are we talking about a virus that might have sipped further into the yam?
No, you can just see, economists. That's why I say the word community hygiene is deep. For public health physicians, they will tell you it's a very large topic. A big textbook can be written for community hygiene. So even today, people still advocate for community hygiene at every level in the school. You could tell me a primary pupil, they teach them in school how to save food, how to keep food away from rodents. It's there from our foundation while we're growing up. So to date, at every level, because we grow up, we become stubborn to basic hygienes. So that is the reason why I still feel like Lassa fever was able to move through. So also, we should also know that WHO are saying that this is a pending endemic, worldly endemic that is coming if we are not careful about Lassa fever. It will be like coronavirus if we are not careful. But the good thing also you should know is that there's cure for this. If you present early, There's a antiviral drugs, ribavirin, that can be used to treat Lassa fever. Unlike COVID-19, and of course for Lassa fever, there's no vaccine yet. That's the opening for scientists to work on. There's no vaccine. There's a treatment for it, ribavirin, if you present early. So that's the good news. So also they're advocating a research in the future, and also possibility that we maintain these hygiene. These hygiene should be maintained. Like you have talked about food, closing of food. When you buy a canned drink, for instance, you should make sure you wash with water, have it clean, and even in your own house, have a good storage system there and there. Remember, it was in the town in Lassa, the Lassa town in Borno State, where 2 missionary nurses died, that this whole thing came into existence. And if you watch, it always happens in the community. Most of the places that these things, endemic things comes out from, it's not even in cities. Because most of us, I will tell you that 60 to 70% of persons in Kaduna State possibly have, in Kaduna City itself, don't know about hygiene, educated. But if you go to the rural places, they don't care. Children play with rats a lot. And they feel like it's mama and they want to play with it. They don't know the danger of having contact with the rat. So, but also know that it is rat-to-rat communication, also like human-to-human carrier. So when we say a carrier rat means a carrier rat, so the transmission goes on that way. So it doesn't mean that all rats, it's just a rat like, this is Lassa. No, I am not saying once you see rat, that means Lassa. But once you see rat, is an endangering species that you should not let such rodents to stay in the house.
Before we go on a commercial break, I would like for you to dwell a little bit more on what you said, human to human transmission. You talked about the fact that a man who has been asymptomatic and has had the virus for about 3 months could actually pass this on to his wife via sexual intercourse, and the wife could become symptomatic.
Yes.
So that for me, I would love for you to dwell on that. Does this also go the other way, that an asymptomatic woman could actually pass this on to the husband? If we're talking about bodily fluids, so we're talking kissing, we're talking sexual intercourse, we're talking tears, we're talking even maybe sweat, towels and all of that.
A breakage, I didn't say, a breakage of the skin is a very potent method of communication between humans and humans. How? When I'm breakage of skin, you have an injury. Your skin is already been exposed. Your system, your blood system is already been exposed to an impending virus. So that is the major way, another way that humans to humans can have the contact. And also by this contact you're talking about. But this contact, these secretions that you're talking about, some of them have a longer time. That's why human to human contact is limited. If you give human to human contact, you could make it like 30 to 20 to 30% route of transmission. But rodents, will bear like 80% route of transmission. That's why you don't dwell more on human to human communication system. But you can still dwell on it. Because I say sperms, for the virus to be in sperm, it takes 3 months. Imagine how long it will be in vagina. But there's also one bad side of this whole virus is it causes miscarriage. For 95% of women who, if you are pregnant, you have Lassa fever. It's something that it can have a lot of side effect for you. It causes, for early pregnancy, it causes miscarriage. This is fact. 95% of women who are pregnant with Lassa fever end up with miscarriage. I'm not saying that once you have miscarriage, you have Lassa fever. With the tenses we are saying here, we are clear. A woman who is pregnant with Lassa fever has a risk of having miscarriage. So, communication is important. You don't say things that people don't understand what you mean. That's why I'm repeating it over and over again. I'm not saying that. I'm only saying that a woman that is pregnant with Lassa fever at early stage of pregnancy is at higher risk of about 95% of miscarriage. So for the ones who have trimester, third trimester, obviously preterm birth, you can quickly try, because any viral infection with the pregnant woman is actually dangerous. So that's then concerning how much in Nigeria. These are factual statements in Nigeria. In 2018, an outbreak spread around 18 states. That was the largest outbreak ever in Nigeria. Now, in January, about 1,081 suspected cases with 90 deaths. In 2019, 810 cases with 167 deaths. These are datas. You know how data moves. Scientists pick it up and get a record of data. Now, WHO also will say that worldly, the frequency is about 400,000 cases per year, while death is about 5,000 deaths per year. So that means in the span of 1 year, then prognosis is about 1% risk of death. I didn't talk about death more. There, the chances that the patient will die is like 1%. Out of every 100 person that have Lassa, the chances that a patient will die is 1 out of 100. But we should not ignore. Like I said, a single life is very important to any health worker.
Especially preventable death.
Preventable death. Thank you very much.
All right, let's quickly go on a commercial break, and we will be back to still continue talking about Lassa fever, that hidden killer disease. A lot of us Nigerians have come to regard, like it's part of us, no be today. And because of that, we're becoming more and more careless. And Lassa fever is taking away lives. Preventable deaths is what we are having, and that's really, really bad for us, because for each person that goes, especially for a death that was preventable, you don't know what quota they would have contributed to this nation, Nigeria. And what's more, I hear, Dr. Owen, that especially between December to around April,
yes,
these are the times when Lassa fever is more common, talking about the dry season.
Yes.
This is true, right?
That is true, yeah, because that's the point where the rats are very vibrant. You understand them, their reproductive systems are more vibrant at that point in time. They reproduce more at that point in time. Compared to during rainy season, rats don't like rain. So during dry season, they tend to flourish and they live well. So of course, they living well means the virus is staying more with us in our environment. Dr.
Augustine Onwin with us in the studio. We'll be right back after this timeout. Do stay with us. Your Health 360, only on Invicta 98.9 FM with Jacqueline Adedija. All right, thank you for staying with us through that commercial break there. Still with Dr. Augustine Owen in the studio, and we're talking about Lassa fever, that hidden killer disease. Well, I don't know if it's still hidden, but I do know that Nigerians, we have developed apathy. When we talk about Lassa, there's no sense of urgency because we just feel that, well, it doesn't kill that much. And, it's been with us for a very long time. However, we do know also that for a lot of societies, the way they have developed has been in their proactiveness towards situations, and that means actively trying to ensure that not just you, but that your neighbor is protected, either by the passing of information or just ensuring that there are facilities that ensure that hygiene, community hygiene, like Dr. Owen has been emphasizing on, is a thing that is forefront for a lot of us. Dr. Owen, before we went on that break, we should have talked about the method through which we can largely prevent this from coming to be. But before I get to that, I think I'd love for you to round up with that. I'd like for people to ask you questions about this, about Lassa fever. And that's why we're going to open up the phone lines at this time so that you can talk to Dr. Owen and ask those questions that you might want to ask. And the numbers are 081 40,000 989. I'll call that again. That's 081 40,000 989. Then we also have the number 070 87 800 989. Once again, 070 87 800 989. Let's go take your calls now. Hello, good evening. Good evening. Well, you're not coming out loud. I wonder why. Hello? Okay, this isn't too clear. Let's see. Keep trying to call. Let's see if we can get through to those who might want to speak with us and ask those questions. Keep trying. The lines are open now for us to talk about Lassa fever. What are your questions? Hello. Good evening. You're too close to your radio set. Please move away. Yes, but you're still... Hello? Yes, I can hear you, but please move away or turn down your radio. Hello, can you? Unfortunately, couldn't hear us. Hello?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
You?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Luca. You are calling from Monabarido.
You're welcome, Mr. Luca.
Yeah, I just want to ask the doctor 2 questions.
Okay.
One, we have many species of rats. So I don't know what of the species that carries the virus or is the carrier of this very disease. That is one.
Okay.
2, why is it that Lassa fever that is really killing, and it started killing in this country before even the COVID-19 or COVID-9 or whatever you call it?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why the emphasis is given to the COVID-19 more than this Lassa fever. I expected by now at least vaccine would have been developed for Lassa fever before now. So what's the emphasis on a certain disease more than the other disease? Are they not all killers?
Okay.
Have a nice day.
And thank you very much for your question. Let me come to Dr. Owen when you want to answer that before we take another call.
Yeah, he actually asked a very intelligent questions, but why I didn't dwell on the type of rat is because let's just take it that you can't know the type of rat when you see them in your kitchen, for instance. But scientifically, it is multi-mammate rats. These are the types of rats that they are major carriers of the virus. Multi-mammate rats. So, but again, if we start using the word multi-mammate rat, we are going to get ourselves confused. So it's better to let's assume that we keep all rodents, all kind of rodents, away from our household. The number 2 question, why emphasis is on COVID-19 is because obviously it's a global. It was a global. Let me use the word was because we are actually going away from it. Even the second wave, things are going better. It's a global epidemic. So of course, there's much attention on it. Lassa fever is actually endemic in Nigeria for quite some time, and that is why much emphasis was not laid on it. That's why we are even here. We are saying it's a forgotten killer disease, and we are trying to remind the people out there that we have not forgotten Lassa. We are still battling with Lassa. Actually, a colleague actually died from some weeks ago from Lassa fever. So it's still
one
something.
of your doctors.
Yes, one of the colleagues died of Lassa fever. So it's still a killer disease. So we have to be watchful out there for this killer disease, Lassa fever.
Let's still go take more calls. Hello, good evening.
Evening.
Good evening. You're welcome. Go ahead.
Hello.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay.
We're connected.
Mr. Madaki.
You're welcome, sir. Go ahead.
Please, I want to ask the doctor, what is the the symptoms of that Lassa fever?
Okay.
So I think I take protection before I attack somebody. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your question. Even though he had actually talked about that before, but I guess he'll have to go over that once again. Let's see if we can squeeze in a few more calls and then you can take them as a group. Do not forget what are the symptoms of Lassa fever. Hello, good evening.
Hello. Does
Yes.
the Lassa fever have,
Hello.
does the Lassa fever have the treatment?
Does it have treatment? Okay. All right. The doctor will answer. Is that all? Is that the only question you have?
Yes.
Okay, just stand by. He will answer your questions. Let's take a few more calls, and then we'll go back to Dr. Onwin to answer them. Still taking your calls this evening. Hello, good evening. Yes, good evening.
My name is Stephen Samuel from Gonigoro.
You're welcome. Go ahead with your question.
There are some, like now, you go to some house, for instance, market, you will see them bringing things out, you will see rice, but they're not hygiene. So, you don't know whether maybe you have already eat on the food, I don't know. So, I don't know what such things like this, what would someone do?
Okay. When you see people bringing out food and obviously rats in the shop.
I've even seen a bread that I see somehow like peas. So I was trying to ask my why is it bread like this? So another thing I said maybe that's a piece of the bread. I don't know the bread and I thought I'm coming. I didn't went back to eat.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you very much for your contributions this evening. Do we have one more call before we have to go back to the doctor to answer us? Okay, we don't have. Okay, we have a call. Let's take this one and then we'll come back to you, Dr. Onwin. Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
You're welcome.
This is ABC, Madam ABC from Gwangibia.
You're welcome,
I
madam.
once advised my neighbor. There was this yam he bought and it was so big and he caught it. He wanted to, rats seemed to eat some parts. He wanted to throw it away. But I advised her that why wasting food in this period of food scarcity? So I advised her to cut it and turn it to yam flour. That in the process of drying and may turn into flour, and even if it's infected by the virus or whatever, that the thing will go away. Am I right in this advice?
Okay.
I was trying to advise her that she turn it to yam flour. That in the process of turning this to yam flour, whatever, even if it's affected the yam, that it will not affect her. Am I right in this assumption?
Okay. All right. The doctor will answer you now. Thank you all for your questions, Dr. Onwin.
Yeah, quickly, the symptoms, like I've mentioned earlier when I was presenting, I said fever is one of the symptoms, vomiting, you have muscle pain, you have weakness, and you have headaches. Those are the possible common symptoms of Lassa fever.
Please run through them again.
Fever, vomiting, muscle pains, weaknesses, headaches. Now, these symptoms that you mentioned, they look like malaria. They look like popular malaria symptoms. That's why I'm saying that they mimic Ebola. They also look like Ebola symptoms. They mimic typhoid fever, mimic malaria, mimic other illnesses. So what differentiates these particular Lassa fever from the malaria or typhoid fever, what have you? You now have pharyngitis, possibly sore throat, bleeding in the worst situation from the orifice. You start bleeding, that is Lassa fever. So that means that for bleeding from the mouth or from the GIT, there are also signs of there are signs and symptoms of Lassa fever. Then number 2 person asks for treatment, which I've said before earlier on. Ribavirin is the antiviral drugs used to treat Lassa fever. That somebody also said, why are we not having vaccine? We are yet to get to that extent. Researchers are still on the process. Science are actually growing. They are evolving. They keep moving. They keep moving to find. COVID-19 never had vaccine before, but now scientists have come with a vaccine for that purpose. So the treatment is ribavirin and antiviral drugs for that. Now, somebody talk about rats coming from food items in the market. The problem now is, I said before, community hygiene. Community hygiene is lacking at that point level. That is where public health physicians, that is their job, to actually hit more, to advocate more on community hygiene. It looks simple, but it's difficult to achieve. It looks, washing of a hand 10 times or 5 times a day is simple, but it's difficult to enforce, even in school. Washing of hand with soap for 10 to 20 minutes running water, it's difficult to achieve, as simple as that community hygiene level is. So you let alone a market woman who wants to make sales, who's looking at making ends meet for herself or himself. So obviously we neglect community hygiene at that point level. So community hygiene is wrong at that point level. Then if the other person asks for if you can churn yam, make a yam become a powdery form. Yes, I said again that the virus can stay outside its host. for 1 hour. About 1 hour, you can start study. So if you shun it, becomes a powdery form. You heat it in the sunlight, obviously eat. And they also have a temperature for surviving. So their immunity level, the particular range of temperature, the virus survive as it goes. So you sun making the yam into powdery form, putting them into sun, a way of actually killing those viruses off from that yam eaten by rats. So you're actually on the right track for telling the human to do such.
All right. Well, the lines are still open. I think we can take a few more calls before we have to go. But doctor, another question I would like to ask is, for someone who is asymptomatic but is carrying around the virus, the Lassa fever virus, what happens to that person? Is it that after some time the person's immune system fights off the virus and the person eventually becomes free, or this person continues to carry around the virus for as long as that person is alive, or it develops into, a full-blown situation later on? What happens to people who are actually asymptomatic?
As simple as malaria is, the number of times you have malaria symptoms, you have this what we call herd immunity. That's as simple as malaria. The number, if you keep having malaria, you have this what we call herd immunity, like a form of a protection. It's just like you once had a fight before with somebody and you won the person. If the person comes next time, you're going to win the person over and over again. So now the virus is with you, you're a carrier, no symptoms, you're moving with it. There's a possibility, although this is not factual. Scientists have not gotten to tell us about immunity towards it. Mm-hmm. But for one, to say asymptomatic person can well go on become asymptomatic for life, and the person becomes immune to the virus. So some persons, we all have different level of immunity. So as such, some person will come down with adverse side effects of the virus after having affected many systems in the body. They come to the hospital with side effects or worse scenarios. Mm-hmm. But now this person is a carrier, asymptomatic carrier, can go on with it. But this is not factual. So there's a lacking on whether they confer immunity. Even with COVID-19 also, there's a lacking to see whether it confer a second immunity. They are saying you can ask COVID-19 and say, okay, I have immunity against it right now. Now, even if I don't take vaccine, I already have immunity against it because I already had it. Now, what about second exposure? Scientists are still trying to study in that direction. So you see, there are still loopholes for us to... virus is a virology. Virology is actually a very large... If it's a bacterial thing we're talking about, we'll have long left this place. But for virus, they are so difficult.
Still taking your calls this evening. Dr. Augustine Onwin with us in the studio, and we're talking about Lassa fever, not just hidden but forgotten killer disease that still lives with us. It's actually endemic. It was found, or at least let's say that the first time it was documented was actually in a place in Nigeria right here. So, I mean, it's safe to say that this is a disease that is with us. And until we're able to completely eradicate it, we will continue to have to fight it by being more proactive. The numbers are 081 40,000 989 and 07087 800 989. Once again, it's 081 40,000 989 and 07087 800 989. If we're not getting any calls, I think at this point I would like to come to you, Dr. Onwin, to ask about how best. I know you've hammered on community hygiene, but I think we would want for you to break it down. What do we need to do to be proactive from community level upwards as regards our hygiene? I know, for instance, that hand washing, you have said this in your submissions, that we must wash our hands. And I must tell you that we're failing, because even for COVID-19 that forced us, I mean, the government had to practically force every establishment to have a hand washing facility outside their establishment. But I must tell you that a lot of those buckets have taken on dust. Many of them don't have water anymore. We're not even going to talk about the lack of hand wash, the liquid soap in so many of these places, or even hand sanitizers. Break it down for us. Apart from, the hand washing, all the things that we need to do step by step.
Now, there's a phrase that says we cannot completely control the population of rats. It's not our duty to come and say let's come and kill all the rats that live in Kaduna State, for instance. It is almost. I think there's one country that don't have rats. Only one. I think I forgot, but one or few that don't have rats. So now we cannot completely carry our guns and say let's go and find the rats and kill them all. So what do? We just have to see how we can live with them but control them. How do we do that? Now, I'll give you a list of something that we can do. Now, for your food supplies, obviously you have a storehouse, a mini storehouse. You try to have your food stores covered. Now, your storehouse is possibly a small place you keep your food items. You make sure they are covered. As simple as that, we can as well emulate that. Some person can buy a bag of rice and keep it open. I'm telling you. So, but you should endeavor to cover those items in your storehouse. Now, number two is also, this is so popular. These are popular these rat killers. They actually have a way of reducing the numbers of rodents we have. In those shops, somebody has a question about a shop. In those shops, those sellers can as well buy the rat killers and not the so-called ones that are for killing the people ingest to kill themselves. No, the first rat, the mechanical one. You just put the poisons, the rat, the fish, and to trap the rat. Mm-hmm. Those kind of, or the rat gum. And there's this people that knows this thing, they know what I'm talking about. It's even a source of income for those people who are selling them. Mm-hmm. So now the market people should just have those shop sellers, not just one market. Those shop sellers that have provision shops, all of that. They should have these rat killers, whatever. That's physical, mechanical ways of combating the rodent number. Then also, they should cover their items properly. And they should not look at profit alone because rat has eaten this item. Let me just quickly sell it off. Who says the rat must have had saliva of the rat, the urine of the rat, because I must have had contact with such items, and you're selling it out. And just because you want to make gain. I believe business is about integrity. It's not about coming to make excess gain. It's integrity. If you make 1 hour a day, keep your integrity while doing the business. God will reward you. God will actually reward you. The also thing you should do is your grains, which I've talked about, your rice, you should store them. Then encourage personal hygiene, which we have also talked about, hand washing. Most important, personal hygiene, hand washing. Because our hands get in contact with almost everything. You sneeze, it's your hand. You touch items, it's your hand. You want to drive your car, it's your hand. You're taking your items, it's your hand. So we should endeavor to wash our hands properly. And also, our garbage. Wow, garbage is the major source where rats will come. Once they smell that this garbage is not well kept, is not well disposed, what happens? They come there. They can perceive that there's a food there for them. Don't blame them. They are mammals as well. They want to survive as well. So they look for the food items. They are staying. It's not the rats' actual problem that they don't know their carriers. They just go there and eat their food. So you have to take away such food away from that environment. Your garbage, dispose them far away from like garbage in marketplace should be taken off. When rat comes and don't see anything to eat, they don't breed. They don't reproduce well in that environment, and they look for where that is suiting for them. So you see, that is for the garbage for keeping rat away. So all I'm trying to say is personal hygiene. You see, I should break it down. Personal hygiene, the mechanical methods of killing the rats, proper storage of food items, unkept food, uneaten food should be covered. Your grains, your tubers, all should be kept in the storeroom. If you don't have a storeroom, cover it well. And even if rat actually had contact with them and you are very skeptical about it, kindly dispose, because health is wealth. And if you turn it again, you can say wealth is health. That's a big topic. Health is wealth. You can't say because you are eating, you want to make economics, you want to try to save the tubers of yam, let me just eat it. But come on, what happens next? You have just assume that you have consumed the virus, Lassa virus, and it will produce Lassa, and you will affect the community. And the so-called money you're trying to save, you end up spending it in the hospital before the government will take charge and identify you, take care of you in isolation centers. Who knows what happens? We don't want to record a single death for Lassa.
I'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Augustine Owen, for coming in this evening to talk to us about Lassa, the hidden and forgotten, for a lot of us, forgotten killer disease. I'm sure for those who were listening, you heard when Dr. Owen said, we lost a colleague to Lassa fever. And so the question I'll leave you with is, if a doctor who knows all these things can die from this viral infection or disease, shouldn't we, laymen, be more careful? We cannot be too careful. Dr. Owen talked about two things that I know that we have slacked on. The washing of hands particularly, and also disposing of refuse properly. Many of us in our areas have all sorts of refuse bins. Many times the refuse has not been well packaged in tightened polythene bags and the rest of it, or even put in drums. The government is trying and packing it, like on a daily basis, trying to pack up refuse. What part are we playing in ensuring that these rats do not have what will make them breed well in our areas? It just goes to show that I am because you are. At community level, if we don't get it right, we can't get it right at any other level. Let's start to take care of our communities, and let's take personal hygiene very seriously. Until next week, when I hope to come to you again on Your Health 360 with another issue that will help us be better, just like Dr. Owen said, health is wealth. I hope that we all have a